Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session. I'm Gabriel, Management Executive at First Digital. We're very excited to host today's event and talk to you about this very practical overview of Microsoft Azure DevOps. And we're going to do that using a real product development scenario. I'll put my video on there so you guys can have a view on me. So before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. Today's session will be recorded, and the recording will be made available afterwards on our Tech Summit website, and we'll share those details with you after the event. So please feel free to refer a colleague to it who might have missed today's session. Due to the size of the audience, because we've had a pretty good interest out there, everybody will be on mute. And we ask that you post any questions in the chat window. You'll find access to the chat window by clicking on the speech bubble in your Teams client, which is at the top right-hand corner. Questions will be discussed by our panel towards the end of the session. It's unlikely that we might get to all the questions, but we'll share our contact details at the end of today's session so you guys can reach out to us with any unanswered questions. So today's webinar is not a training session on Azure DevOps. It's actually a real practical overview of how we, First Digital as a business, used Azure DevOps to develop our own software as a service application called PoppyCheck. The session will be hosted by Gary Finberg, who's the product owner of PoppyCheck, and Lawrence Hay, who was the lead solutions architect on the PoppyCheck development team. Also in the background is Stephanie Brainard. She's our marketing coordinator. She's operating the cogs of the webinar. So if you guys have any issues, please contact her using the Teams chat function, and she'll try and assist best she can. So First Digital builds out many different value-added services across technology verticals. And I'll just briefly take you through that. One of the core pillars of our business is software development, and we do internal and external application development, heavyweight e-commerce development, and by the nature of the kind of clients that we engage with, very often complicated application integration is required. We target on-premise infrastructure for our work, and obviously also do serverless cloud development. And a growing competency in the business, due to the changing nature out there in the software development world, which is really why we're hosting today's session, is the whole DevOps and containerization capability that we also offer through our development team in First Digital. Very strong in the process automation world. We're very long-standing partners of both K2 and Nintex. Really strong capability that we offer through the First Digital team in that space. We've got a fully fledged end-to-end Office 365 team who look at enabling customers through Teams, SharePoint Online, Power Platform. That capability all sits within the First Digital business. Machine learning and analytics through our data team. We've got a platform advisory services team that help customers migrate from an on-premise environment to a cloud-based environment. And then a business transformation services team where we take to market our project management, quality assurance, business analyst capability, and offer that out to our clients. Great. So before we start today's session, we'd like to do a quick poll. You'll see that come up in your Teams client. It'll pop up in front of you. Otherwise, you can also see it in the chat part of Teams. If you bring up the chat window on the side, that should come up now. So please select one of the options and click submit, and then we'll discuss the results of this poll at the end of today's session. Great. I'll just give everybody a minute to complete that poll. Okay, great. Thanks for that. If you didn't manage to catch the poll come up in your Teams client, like I said, you'll find it in the chat part of the window in your Teams client. The question there was: is your business involved in product development? Do you guys at all do any sort of product development? It'll give us a good idea of today's audience. Okay, great. So PoppyCheck is a compliance assessment tool that we took to market about a year ago. We actually built the tool back in 2017 but we decided to completely rewrite it in order to turn it into a true software as a service product that runs on Microsoft Cloud Services. So we faced an unmovable deadline, which was the 1st of July 2021, when Papaya actually became law in South Africa. And we've also faced many new challenges that went beyond just managing code. And Gary Finberg, the product owner of PoppyCheck, will cover these with you. Following that, Lawrence will demonstrate the end-to-end life cycle of how we manage the development team using Azure DevOps. So Gary had to manage the whole life cycle of PoppyCheck, from whiteboard sessions where we refined our initial idea to prioritizing what we were going to do first, tracking progress, and managing the quality and the support processes of all the clients that run on our PoppyCheck platform. So without further delay, Gary, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending this morning. So today I'm going to speak to the PoppyCheck kind of SaaS journey that we've been on, more from a product owner perspective, and discuss some of the considerations, in kind of positioning the development, and as Gabriel mentioned, kind of moving it from its kind of traditional format to the SaaS format. And, some of the, from a managing a team perspective, some of the technical challenges, infrastructure challenges. So I'll speak to those from a non-technical perspective, and then hand over to Lawrence, who will deal with it, the technical issues.
Thanks, Gary. Just before you continue, Gary, I just think you need to swap your displays or share your display screen. We're seeing your notes part of your presentation.
Okay, one sec.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay. So just to give some context, so what is SaaS? Software as a service is a delivery model for business solutions where the application is hosted on the provider's cloud infrastructure and available for the client as a subscription service. SaaS applications do not require any installation, hardware or software, and the product can be accessed on any device, such as mobile or browser, and an internet connection is required. And something that I've realized over the last couple of years now is that SaaS product development is almost an art, because of the kind of continuous nature and the kind of iterative loop of, real-time feedback from multiple clients, that it needs kind of this nurturing and continuous learning, upgrading, and application. And obviously the end goal is kind of emerging with a market differentiated, relevant, and enjoyable product for customers. Just some interesting trends. 80% of businesses already use at least one SaaS application. As per Gartner, SaaS solutions generated revenue in excess of $105 billion last year and growing exponentially. And the context of the global pandemic has given like a massive push to the adoption of SaaS products, and developing new SaaS products is at an all-time high. I'm going to skip this slide. I'll leave it there for your reference, just in terms of, in the interest of time. But it just speaks to all the different disciplines and factors that we needed to consider in this development life cycle. So, as Gabriel mentioned, we had developed PoppyCheck a while back, as it was a SharePoint-based application, but we kind of identified that it was too niche, and the aperture on the market was pretty small. So, in kind of refocusing our attention on the kind of SaaS opportunity, we kind of asked ourselves a bunch of questions. So things like, who are our target customers? What problem is our product solving? Who are the people facing the problem that we're going to solve? Are we able to describe our product clearly in a single line? I mean, have we got focus? Can we articulate how that product solves the problem? What are the existing problems faced by our customers? What is our product's USP or key point of competitive differentiation? And critical is, how easy will it be for end users to get started and use the product? So these going through this exercise helped us focus on our next steps. So some of the challenges with SaaS are many. So with SaaS, everything's happening in real time. There's no margin for error. And ultimately, it's just a continuous iterative loop of a series of like refinements, test, release, feedback, refine, test, and release. So it's like that juggling multiple plates, nonstop. And basically, we kind of continually moving between a customer service or customer feedback and interaction, taking that input and putting that in, ultimately that ending up in some type of release. And it's a kind of continuous iterative loop. And some of the kind of plates that we kind of juggling, so we need continuous operations. So obviously, with a SaaS application, you're pretty much guaranteeing like 100% uptime. And so therefore, there's a lot of focus on the Azure infrastructure. In our case, our app is hosted in Azure. So critical there to be sort of monitoring and managing those infrastructure elements, and with a view to maintain uptime and keep performance optimal. And then also the DevOps side, which Lawrence is going to speak to, around kind of managing our team, managing tasks, managing the pipeline, managing our code base, managing deployments, and the whole release process. There's a continuous planning component. So we're obviously, I'll speak to this in a little bit more detail down the line, but ultimately we're constantly dealing with features, enhancements, optimizations, and these all require planning and coordination, again, because it has to be non-invasive. We can't interrupt that service for our users. Continuous integration is a component that we're aiming towards. It's on our roadmap, and but we're not currently using that. Continuous testing, again, that sort of is an offshoot of the continuous planning. So we rely heavily on DevOps to kind of manage that sort of aggressive kind of testing process, so that our releases are kind of seamless. Critical component is continuous monitoring. So obviously, on many levels, we're offering a real-time kind of live service, and we've got a kind of constant uptake of new users. So what's critical in being able to manage the margins in value, or our kind of the viability of the financial aspect of the product, is to be constantly monitoring the scale as against sort of consumption and as against costs in Azure. So we kind of constantly need to be monitoring sort of storage growth and the compute, and weigh that up against performance, And then obviously we're also sort of constantly monitoring the app, so not necessarily for app failures as such, but to kind of preemptively get ahead of things and remediate them before they become failures. There's a continuous delivery phase, which is, I guess, part of the continuous planning and testing, which is that we continuously delivering on specifically fixes and enhancements, because it's one thing if you've developed a single compiled app that is sitting on a customer site, and you're interacting with one administrator or one business person feeding back on issues. But if you've got hundreds of customers and each one is as important, and they're all coming, so that is a big challenge, is kind of managing that workload, our capacity against the priority of these issues. And then a continuous feedback. So this is critical to the process, is that we've got a continuous feedback loop with our customers, so that we understand what their issues are, and we're engaging with them in a number of different ways. So either via kind of email, we've got emails that go out asking them how they're doing with the product, what their issues are, what's working for them, what's not working for them. And then we take that, we assess all of that, and then roll that into our kind of testing and our release. So you can see that it's quite a process to manage. From managing the team, it's been super useful in that we've got multiple changes in the resources allocated to the project over time. So we've implemented coding standards and standardized DevOps processes for consistency and continuity, which has been a massive help. So new devs that are onboarded, we can get them up to speed really quickly, and they're up and running. We run our stand-ups using the DevOps boards, so we've got that kind of feedback into the process. We utilize the boards for assigning and tracking work, and we're also able to surface the DevOps team dashboard in Microsoft Teams. Some technical challenges. Obviously, we need to maintain 100% uptime of the service. One of the mantras in SaaS is kind of any device, anytime, anywhere. So with SaaS, all that should really matter is the app itself, irrespective of device. So we've got to guarantee the same user experience anytime, anywhere on any device. So therefore, extensive device compatibility testing is critical, and it's obviously quite challenging and time consuming. I mentioned earlier, we rely heavily on DevOps pipelines for automated provisioning of resources. So we need to kind of spin up various aspects while we sort of doing dev testing, in the background. And then a big challenge is that we've got to deliver fixes, updates, and features to users without impacting their normal use of the app. So it's this background kind of testing, and it has to be non-intrusive. Challenges also around managing the subscription lifecycle. So it's a subscription model. Therefore, we've got a number of multiple kind of subscription states, their activations, there's renewals, their upgrades, and their cancellations that we need to manage. And these are all dynamically managed out of the app. A critical aspect of a successful SaaS app is maintaining UI simplicity on the front end while you're delivering some rich functionality behind that. And that's critical because SaaS apps are designed to be used and should be intuitive and easy to use. So one of the big challenges is that, while we're sort of adopting new features, we still want to keep our interface super clean. And that's one of the really positive messages we're getting from customers and people looking at the app, is that it is so clean and simple. So we're resisting that urge to add bells and whistles and any gratuitous functions or to clutter up the interface. It's really we got to keep it simple. And then one of the other challenges was just integrating a kind of a payment gateway, so we can automate the provisioning of the service and automate kind of upgrades internally from within the app, and and what we're going to add soon is in-app purchases, so where we can sell add-ons inside the app. One of the other challenges is if just managing our own tenants is not enough of a mission, we also offer a white-labeled version of PoppyCheck, which comes with its own set of challenges. So this is typically something that we are quite cautious about. We sort of, they're with specific partners, but it's got its own set of challenges. So obviously we need the ability to kind of rapidly deploy a white-labeled variation of the base product, because we got to get it up and running for them quite quickly. And typically that comes with its own issues, because at minimum, there's a branding customization that has to happen. So to that end, we've developed a kind of skinning mechanism where we've got a kind of style sheet template that makes it quite easy to manage that the customer's corporate identity and get it to look like their environment. We also need to be quite careful with the branding side, because we obviously can't tamper with the UI. And, so that's one consideration. And then where we try and keep it quite standard for our white label versions, it's typical that a customer has certain requirements that they need, certain things that they need adapted so that it's works for their user culture and their user base. So it might be things like how things are labeled, and then in some cases, certain features that are essential for customers, they might want specific reporting or whatever. So we've got to factor all of that in. We've got to manage the release management side of things. So, obviously each new white label tenant that we add is a new pipeline branch or deployment to prod. So these things are critical to manage. We need to coordinate and with the customer and stick to our release schedule. That they need to trust our release schedule. I mentioned we're managing multiple branches, pipelines, and deployment schedules. So Dev and QA are in our environment, but when we deploy to prod, there are multiple prods. So that really needs to be coordinated and thoroughly tested. And Lawrence is fully on top of that side of things. He'll talk to you about that. We also need to manage expectations with our white label customers. So we need to communicate what we're releasing. So what is in each release? Are there fixes, enhancements, new features, and so that their customers can understand, when they log in the next time, they know what they're going to see. And to that end, what we have is we've got a notifications capability from our sysadmin level of the app. So we can basically push that out. So if we've got a release going out on Friday, for example, I'll publish that notification to those users, and it'll be a notification telling them upcoming changes, a list of things, what to expect. There might be some screenshots if there's some UI changes, and they're able to see that. So when they log in on Monday, they know, they're not surprised by what they see. We also have to monitor their usage and costs. And as I mentioned before, it's critical. We've got to have strong coordination of activities with a partner. One of the key challenges is managing application features. So this is a key aspect of the product evolution, and we're very open. We welcome any feedback, in demos or from customers, any suggestions, because ultimately our goal is to evolve the product to increase its value for the broadest user base. So we're very sort of open and to feature requests and suggestions. And briefly, feature management falls into two main categories. So we've got our internal product roadmap, which is our vision of how we should evolve the app. And then we've got client requests and their wish list stuff coming in, which are sort of more ad hoc requests from customers. So what we do is we've got, like, you wouldn't believe the flood of stuff we get. Every customer's got their own angle on how this should work. They've seen other products, and so what we do is we take all of this input and then we classify them. So we've got a couple of categories. So we've got one called missing feature. So that's where we're getting pretty much every client is asking for a specific thing, which is essential to the functionality of the app. And we acknowledge, like, we didn't think of everything when we were developing the app. So where they've pointed this out, and we can clearly see that it's a critical thing to the functionality of the app, that becomes a very high priority, and we aim to get that in as quickly as possible. We've just had a scenario like that now, where our app, we give the users the option to upload evidence back into blob storage, and the only provision we'd made was for them to upload their evidence as Word docs. But the feedback we got was that a lot of them, when documents go for signing, they're executed as PDFs. So we rushed, and Lawrence really got that feature in super quickly, and we've now got happy customers, and that's something that benefits all our customers. Then we have new commonly requested features. So these are things that are just coming in ad hoc, and what we do is we manage this in teams. We've got a list. I add the features there, and we monitor the count, and it's kind of sorted by the most requested. And typically, users have got great suggestions. So we kind of put these all on the list, and then we assess them internally. And obviously we have to juggle. It's a constant juggling act between the desire to, like, satisfy the customer and the available resources. So that's another real challenge, is that balancing act. We've got enhancements. So these might be identified through our testing or our own internal usage, or while I'm demoing, or might be recommended by customers. We have optimizations, which are, optimization of a feature which is going to increase performance of the overall app. And then things like nice to have. So these are like bells and whistles features that would be nice to have, but are low priority. And luckily we've got Lawrence, who stops me from implementing bells and whistles. He's very practical. But those, we take note of those, and those are sort of a very low priority, but we're aware of them. And then one of our last categories is something specific to a single customer. So we've got feature requests that are quite legitimate. They're not bells and whistles for a specific customer, maybe for their vertical or their specific requirements. So we have a customer that has a group of hospitals, And they've got some specific requirements around like medical compliance and, you know, HIPAA and things like that. So that would be a kind of a bespoke development, which we would consider. But, you know, just to note that that would only really benefit a single customer. So it's a special case. Managing fixes, updates, and deployments. So these are the issues that we identify internally via QA, demos, our own usage or testing. We've got issues reported by customers, and we've got a help desk. So you know, customers have an email address. They can email those tickets in that kind of get processed by the help desk and then forwarded into our DevOps loop. They get classified by priority, urgency, effort, and type. Challenges with implementing fixes is obviously they've got to be tested and QA'd. Then we've got to plan updates or releases. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got to notify the customers. Everyone's got to be in the loop. And then we've got to monitor our customer feedback after updates. So typically, you know, you can never anticipate, no matter how much you communicate, you can't anticipate how people are going to perceive a change. And then managing that deployment schedule. From a managing customers and support perspective, we are about to launch a poppycheck.com website, which has got support resources. We're adding sort of training videos and webinars and things like that. We've got a bunch of support information on there. I mentioned that they can submit support tickets. Our key focus is on the turnaround time and communication. So we can't, again, given that we've got limited resources, we can't always be jumping, you know, to respond to every single customer in real time. I mean, so what we do is we've got to kind of classify those. We focus on the turnaround time. And what I find is key is the constant communication back to the customer. So as long as they feel that you're taking them seriously, you're responding, it's in progress, you can show them, you know, that is happening, they consider it. And then we've got sort of a number of automated kind of emails that go out. So we feel it's critical to stay in touch with our users so we can understand what's working for them, what's not working for them. So occasionally I'll contact a user, ask them if they want a quick Teams call. So we, you know, half an hour, quickly talk through their issues. Have they got any usage obstacles? And that seems to be working really well. Then lastly, just managing and monitoring costs. So as I mentioned, this is all a critical balancing act, you know, in that we've got, you know, we're selling this on an annual basis. And this was a really tricky, big challenge in getting this to market, was deciding on the pricing model. You know, is it per user? You know, is it per assessment? But eventually we've just decided on kind of an upfront annual cost. And therefore, it's critical that we manage our resources. So we've got to be very cognizant of what that usage is, specifically in blob storage. We've got various third-party tools that contribute to our sort of overhead on the product. So it's critical to manage that so we can keep the app viable and profitable. We've got to be able to scale seamlessly and quickly while still keeping those costs down. So we can't just throw compute, we can't just throw stuff at it. You've got to factor everything in. And because the SaaS app is hosted entirely by us, we've got to kind of monitor and manage everything, you know, and the accrual of our user data is the biggest cost concern at the moment. You know, there's very little sort of overhead in running the app, but it's more around the storage. Then there are other infrastructure costs we've got to watch, i.e. like app services, compute, SQL, and SendGrid we use. As I mentioned, we've got to monitor blob storage growth and various third-party tools. We use something called Encodian to do some workflow. So that was it from my side. I'm going to hand over to Lawrence to speak to the really important bits in DevOps. Thank you.
Great, Gary. Thanks for that. Just before we hand over to Lawrence, just give Lawrence the opportunity to prepare himself a second poll that we'll run. And this is maybe more specific to those that do participate in product development or software development in their own businesses. The question there is, do you have a structured release process in place for when you do updates to your custom software? So you'll see that poll come up, and I'll give everybody the opportunity to answer that. And then in the meantime, over to Lawrence, who's the solutions architect on the PoppyCheck product. So I'm going to hand over to him, and he's going to give you guys a practical view of how they've implemented this inside Azure DevOps.
Gabriel, can you see my screen?
I can indeed.
Awesome. So again, my name is Lawrence. I'll be running you through Azure DevOps end-to-end high-level overview, with diving a little bit deeper into the technical side of the build and deployment pipelines. If there's anything you want to chat about in specific sections, just let me know, and we can cover it in the Q&A section, or we can get in touch afterwards if we don't have time at the end. So we're just going to jump into the boards. You'll see this board is very empty at the moment. I've just created a new sprint. We can't be releasing all the secret spices of what we're doing before it's been released. So on the boards, a really good feature that we have here is just being able to filter out tickets depending on the developer that's working on it, or if you're a manager and you want to manage everyone's work, you can just change the selections over here, and you'll be able to see everything. So we've just got a ticket here. We're going to run through this ticket end to end, deploying it to the dev environment. So if we just look at what the ticket is doing, we just need to update some text on the dev environment. On the actual app itself, we need to remove some wording here. Cool. So as a developer, we kind of want to integrate our tickets with our code, keep everything together as close as possible. And that's what Azure DevOps does extremely well. So what we can do, once we have our ticket and we're ready to start working on it, we can pull it into in progress, and we can create our feature branch straight off our ticket. This will map the work item to the commit. And as you'll see later on when we do the pull requests and the code reviews sections, that this becomes extremely useful. I've already created the feature branch here, so we don't have to do all the fetching on the Visual Studio side. But at this point here, you just create your feature, and the naming of your feature branches can be anything. You can either use a bit of text to define what the branch is doing, or something I like to use is just the ID of the user story, as you can see up here next to my mouse. This is not the only way to link the tickets, and I'll show you another way of doing it as well when we get there. So we've created our branch. Just to quickly run over some the branching strategies. The branching strategies are very important, especially when working with pipelines, as the pipelines will run dependent on your branching strategies. So if you're doing feature branches with with specific merging branches and specific release branches, then you have to build your pipelines in a specific way to cater for that. So if we just go to Visual Studio, you can see I'm on my feature branch down here, and we're just going to update this, get rid of that text, and if the other way of linking the work item to your commit would be just grabbing the ID of your user story and just going hash and adding that user story in there. We've already got those linked because we created the branch from the ticket itself, so we don't need to do that. Linking the tickets to your commits doesn't mean you can't put good commit messages in. You still need to do that just for your backlogs and your your Git history. Cool. Okay, awesome. Oh, bunch the different screen. Okay, cool. So we now drop this into our code review, and in our pull request section, technical difficulties. Let's create a new pull request, and we're going to push this into release. And now you can see that the user story is now attached to the pull request. You can see the changes that were made to the file. So if we create this, we also lock down our branches with branch policies. So you can't just push code wherever you need to push it. It is required there's approvals required to actually get code into release branches and stuff like that for actual deployments. So we know that code going in is a lot cleaner.
Yeah, and I think the significance, Lawrence, if I may interject there, the significance here is the fact that a user story, which is a user statement, be it a bug or a feature request, as Gary has explained, is directly linked to the actual code, who peer reviewed the code, and ultimately that piece of code going into a production state. So you create a relationship between the feature in its text and English description through to what is the resulting code that's associated with that.
Yeah. As well, when it comes to doing the code reviews now, it becomes a lot more meaningful for the people doing the reviews, because they can see exactly what the code is, what it's meant to do, and be able to comment on the code more efficiently. So if we just approve this, complete, and we're going to delete our branch after merging. Cool. So you'll see here in a moment that the pipeline will kick off. As you can see, it started there. The pipeline will start building and will release to the dev environments just in a minute. So hopefully we can beat the pipeline to it. So a very important feature, or not feature, but information to know about pipelines is that they use agents to do the building and deploying of the software. These agents, when you start your first Azure DevOps experience, by default you get two agents for free. One is the MS hosted agent. You get 1,800 minutes of runtime for free, and you get one self-hosted agent for free as well. The Microsoft hosted agents, you don't have to worry about them. They're maintained by Microsoft, which makes life very easy, as well as you can change the VM image that has been used when on the pipeline itself. So if you need to run in Mac OS, Windows, or Linux, you can just change it in your YAML files, which we'll run over in a minute. Self-hosted agents obviously run on your machine itself, which gives you the power of just being able to have the correct tool sets installed. Whereas with Microsoft hosted, you'll have to install the tool sets that you'll need if you need something specific, as those agents are killed and rebuilt every pipeline run. As well, just on top of the agents, for every Visual Studio Enterprise key that you add to your Azure DevOps, you'll get one self-hosted agent with that key. Cool. So it's one thing to have your pipelines building, but you obviously need to connect your pipelines to Azure or any other service that you need to deploy to. So the first things is obviously with the you should have a service account. You shouldn't really be running this through a specific user. Having a service account with the correct permissions, both in Azure or the environment you're deploying to and in DevOps, will make life a lot better. And when connecting to services, there's many services you can connect to. So if we just take a quick look at all the different services we have, yeah, there's many services here that that the pipelines can connect to, and obviously there's even more. You can add extensions to your DevOps environments, which will open up even more service connections, and then you just set up your environment where you need to deploy to, and give access in your pipeline to be able to complete those roles. Another important thing to note is just creating a personal access token. This will allow the pipeline to authenticate without having to use a username and password, which is very key. The next steps is we're just going to take a look at libraries and environments. Libraries are pretty much just configs. They just store the data that your pipeline is going to need to run, such as deploying username and passwords, connection strings for different environments. Your personal access tokens can go in here, and obviously just secure the stuff that you don't want people to have access to, as well as in your libraries you can store your secure files. These files can be used for connecting for connecting to webhooks or your certificates for deploying to things, anything like that. Then your environments. So environments can be set up in two different ways. You can set them up manually through here. The different services you can, we'll run over that in a bit. So these, or you can set it up through your YAML files, which look like this. And if we just close some of the stuff, you'll see down here that we're using a specific environment. And once your YAML file runs the first time, it will go and create these environments automatically for you if you're not going to do them manually. What you can do is you can set up approval processes, as well as setting the VM image that environment's going to run on. So if you're using a Microsoft hosted agent, you can set up each environment to run on different OSs. If you want to, or if you have a specific environment that needs to run on Linux, for example, you can set it up so that specific environment will run on Linux and the rest will run on Windows, as well as just setting up the approvals. So if we need to have a specific approval check to be able to push into the QA environments, which you should, we can just set up the users that can approve it, and how many approvals are required to actually push that code into the next environment. And then cool, going into pipelines, the main bit to show. I don't really want to run too much over the YAML part of it, because this can get a bit daunting initially, but Azure DevOps has done a really good job of making the YAML a lot easier to use in Azure DevOps. So you have all your tasks here, which goes back to the whole classic view of building pipelines back in the TFS days, and you can essentially just click on these items. You can fill out the details. You click add, and it'll generate the YAML for you if you need a bit of a template to run off in the beginning. But there's lots of documentation around all the different tasks and kind of what you can do. This kind of pipeline is called a multi-stage pipeline, which means we don't use the release pipelines. The releases are done in the pipeline, and we use the approvals to block the pipeline from just running end to end. So the other way you could build it is just having a build pipeline and then running your releases separately. I don't think for us specifically, we didn't really need that because we're running a slightly smaller team, and we're keeping everything quite close together. So yeah, our releases just become a lot more simple as well. If we need to, because all this code is now checked into your repo, your YAML pipelines are checked into your repo, you can then lift and shift these pipelines, use them for other projects, and then you just change your library details, and you've got an up and running pipeline. Yeah, so when these pipelines run, you create on the build section of the pipelines, you create artifacts. These artifacts are essentially the end goal. So it'll have your DAC pack for your database. If you want to run your database changes through your pipeline, it'll have all the DLLs ready and zipped up to be deployed to the different environments. And these artifacts will be stored for a couple of days, or you can decide on how long you want to store this for. Which means if for some reason you do a release that goes all the way through to prod, there's something wrong with that release, you can then go back and rerun a previous pipeline and deploy an old set of code back. So that harps on the fact of being able to keep as close to 100% uptime as possible for your apps. Yeah, that's as well. These pipelines you can run all your unit testing, UI testing, integration testing. You can run all of that in your pipelines with relative ease, and it gives a lot of feedback. So you get your tests and coverages. This is a pipeline that's run fully through. You can see all the steps that it's gone through, the approvals that passed to allow them to go through to the different environments. So this is still deploying or running. Well, I just need to wait for this to run. I don't know if we just want to continue and we can jump. If we want to jump to the Q&A, come back and we can show the actual pipeline complete.
Yeah, absolutely, Lawrence. I think that's a good idea while your pipeline runs, because obviously you'd like to show to the guys how that minor code change that you made actually ends up on a environment as an actual change to the product. So let's do that while we wait for that to finish. Let me just consult the question section here. Gary, I think this one is for you. A question by Gordon. What do we use for feature flagging in the app until a feature is ready for mass consumption by customers? I think you might have partially answered that, but maybe if you want to comment further on that, Gary, in terms of how you use the backlog inside the DevOps to manage that kind of scenario.
Sure. So from hey Gordon, from a front end perspective, as I say, what we do is we're going to notify customers of this ahead of time. So these are kind of managed in DevOps. So there's a kind of funnel. Once they've gone through the classification and the kind of prioritization and the planning around the implementation of them, they go into the backlog. And as Lawrence is ready to release, we kind of package up a kind of document around everything that's going to happen in that release. So that gets added to the notifications that get surfaced directly in the app for users, so they get a heads up in terms of what to expect when they log in again.
Okay, great. I hope that answers the question, Gordon. Otherwise, you can further elaborate in the chat. Christo is asking a question here. Again, Gary, I think maybe you're best placed to answer that. how do you manage new commonly requested features and the number of customers that ask for it?
So what we do is we use Teams. So we've got a kind of Teams environment set up to manage the kind of user side and the feedback side and the of the application. So we've got some lists in there, and basically what I do is all feature requests that come in via the support desk or from various things. It might be on a demo, might be directly a call from a customer. All of those get kind of documented and added to a feature requests list. It's effectively a SharePoint list that's surfaced in Teams. And each feature, so we go through and we classify it. And as I mentioned, we kind of look at various aspects, so kind of obviously if it's something that's a showstopper for users, that gets a massive priority. And even if it's only reported by a single user, if the impact is great, that gets immediate priority, and it's all hands on deck to get that sorted and released. But the other features fall into various categories, and I mentioned, so it's a constant juggling act between that feature request, and obviously the temptation is to add every feature to the app, because a lot of the requests are valid and great ideas. But again, it's that juggling act. We've got very limited resources. There's time constraints. We've got a lot of other, as you could see from some of the slides, and the challenges. There's a lot of ongoing background activity that consumes our time. So given that kind of calculation, we just put them on this list. We've got a count. So it's sorted by kind of count. So, so we can see if, the percentage of our user base that's requested that. And then we assess it. Is it something that's mission critical? Is it something that's a great idea? And out of those great ideas, how do we prioritize that in terms of effort? We also got to look at the time it's going to take. If it's a quick win, and we can slip that in, kind of into the cycle. But we've just got to kind of manage those.
Okay. So Lawrence, I'm going to hand back to you, both for you to just demonstrate how Azure DevOps has now compiled your code, etc., and in your pipeline, pending on approval, that change is now ready to deploy to the environment. But so that you can just pick up on that story. But at the same time, also throw a question in your direction, which is from Christian, who's asking, does DevOps cater for any SQL changes? And I think you've touched on that, so maybe you can just answer the question at the same time as finishing up your demonstration.
Sure. So, okay, cool. So I think let's quickly just touch on the pipeline. So you can see the build's completed. We got one artifact out. We've checked to see if there's any database changes, so we'll actually do both at the same time. So what this pipeline does is it builds a DAC pack from code. We have our database in the repo itself. So we compared that database from the code to that specific environment, and we can create a DAC pack from that. We can then use that to deploy to the different environments. Obviously, it's been skipped because we didn't actually make any database changes, so we've just skipped the actual updating of the database for the dev environments. We've deployed the web app and the API. So this deploys to two different applications, and we're now pending, waiting for a check to pass to push to the QA environment. So this is where the devs will now test on the dev environment, make sure everything's good from their point of view, and then we'll push it through to the QA team, which after they've tested, there'll be another pass check that's required here, which is required of the QA team to approve, as well as the manager of the project. So pushing to prod is not an easy thing. So as you'll see, if I just refresh the screen, you'll see now that the client's text is now not there. And that comes back to the whole point of using CI/CD pipelines, is that we can push smaller changes more frequently, which means there's not as big of an impact to the app itself. It keeps a good feel to the app and reduces downtime. It also means that we can just release fixes a lot quicker and not have to worry about, this fix wasn't a very important fix. We're now not going to spend 30-40 minutes now deploying to all the different environments. We don't have to worry about that because it's all automated. And that's the power of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a key point you make there, Lawrence. I don't know if you guys have, for instance, noticed, but WhatsApp and I think Uber do weekly releases of their app, and you can imagine the amount of manual work that would have gone into doing weekly releases of a mobile app, because there's more hoops to jump, which Lorena in the question is actually alluding to. You just can't do that without automating it. It's impossible to do that manually. So just to Lorena's question, you can quickly comment on this, Lawrence, just cognizant of time. She's asking, can your end environment be the Apple App Store, for instance, or the Android, Google Play Store?
Yeah, so you can deploy to pretty much any environment. There's tasks to be able to deploy anywhere, and that's the power of YAML as well. Is you don't have limitations. You can run PowerShell scripts in there. So if you need to deploy something specific, you just need to make sure you got the API tokens from the App Store, and to allow the authentication of the pipeline, and you can deploy to pretty much any environment possible.
Yeah. We've just recently now proved that point as well with Apple App Store by deploying to a test flight state at least, completely automated. There's a bit more hoops to jump through, and I think that's important, for the developers out here and maybe the managers of the developers who's going to beat the guys up after the session. But there's a lot of hygiene that you need to apply to your development process in order to make this work. You need to think about how you externalize your configuration, how you make sure that your secrets inside your configuration, database passwords and connection strings, are indeed still kept a secret when you're going to automate this. And DevOps obviously cater for all of those scenarios, but there are some typical developer hygiene that you need to jack up on in order to also make this work end to end. Great. We're about on time, so I want to just close off the session, and I do apologize if I didn't cover everybody's questions. Our contact details are in front of you. If you feel free to mail us at devops@firsttech.digital, or if you're an existing First Technology customer, please reach out to your account manager. They'll put you in touch with us, and we'll happily discuss your specific environment or scenario with you and see how we can assist you guys or your development team in successfully adopting Microsoft Azure DevOps. I've also included a couple of links. This deck will be made available, like I said, on our Tech Summit website. You can download this and the recording. There's a DevOps forum, a Microsoft-led forum that you can access. And I've also included a link to DevOps licensing. It's not simple. There are complicated aspects of how this is licensed, and there are benefits as well. For instance, if you're a enterprise subscriber to Visual Studio, you do have some of the DevOps and the build agent benefits as part of that licensing. But again, if you have any questions around licensing, please reach out to First Digital or First Technology if they're your licensing partner, and we'll happily assist you with that. I think then, just in conclusion, I want to thank Gary and I want to thank Lawrence for their time today to come and share their experiences of how they built the PoppyCheck product using Azure DevOps. I want to thank Stephanie. She really put the webinar and did all of the logistics in the background. So thank you very much to her. And then finally, thank you for all of you for attending. I hope you guys have learned something out of the session today. And we look forward to hearing from you if you require further assistance. And other than that, thank you very much and have a great day.